We are back, and it's another Friday, so let's answer some questions from the listeners.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I am your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us on wherever you get your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you're a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me and this show, I am based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB, doing some hosting, co-hosting, and producing as well. But when it comes to this podcast, when you click on this link, you know that you're going to be getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Well, we are back after Halloween. Didn't have an episode yesterday, but I opened it up for some of the followers on Twitter out there to send me questions before Mailbag Friday, and I would answer them immediately instead of doing it for an episode, just so I could give some form of content and not doing an episode last night. But had some party going on for Halloween, had people over, so just didn't have the time after work to be able to get an episode out. But hopefully you guys will enjoy this edition of a Mailbag Friday. So let's kick things off with Aiden's question. He asked, would you sign Alex Bregman for 6 years, $120 million? We do know that Alex Bregman is going to be one of the more expensive guys on the market. And you look at third base, is it a position of need for Kansas City? I don't know if it's a need. It's a weakness, some would say. But I do believe that a middle-of-the-order bat or a top-of-the-lineup bat is desperately needed, and Alex Bregman would be that. And you'd be giving him roughly $20 million. You'd be paying him until his age 36 season, so you're likely only getting a all-star version of him for maybe half that deal or maybe 4 years of that deal. It would be a splash, that's for sure. That would be one incredible expensive deal for Kansas City. And Alex Bregman, of course, would be a huge upgrade for this lineup. He immediately would be, the second most valuable hitter likely on this team next to Bobby Witt Jr., just because of what he brings you really in all aspects of the game. Offensively, he's great. Defensively, he'd be great over at third base. He would be an upgrade over Michael Garcia, both not really in the field, probably slightly below Michael Garcia defensively, but offensively a massive, massive upgrade there. So the question becomes, is $20 million a year worth it, and is 6 years going to be worth it in the long run? As of right now, I think I'd say no, because I don't think if you put all of your money on Alex Bregman, it would completely change the lineup. I don't know if just one guy is going to be able to overhaul this group. I would rather it be, two guys coming in, whether it be an outfield bat, first base / DH bat. I just would like it to be a little bit more dispersed than all of the money, really, that they'd have in free agency. You'd feel like going toward one player there. And I don't know. I just get this feeling now that Alex Bregman's going to go back to Houston. They'll be willing to give him that type of deal. But if not, somebody will give him that $20 million a year deal. So right now, I think I would say no to that type of deal. It also wouldn't surprise me if he gets a little bit more than $20 million a year after, what he was able to do in Houston for, nearly a decade, almost a decade, getting close to that. So yeah, I think he's going to be a very expensive piece out there in free agency. Alex asks, can the Royals possibly offer Juan Soto an Ohtani contract with deferred money that can go into an index fund and inflation in play? I would just say right now, Juan Soto's not going to be a Royal, and I don't see Juan Soto doing what Ohtani did. Mainly because I think Ohtani did that so that he could be guaranteed a World Series almost. And here's another part of it. Ohtani is so marketable, right? So he's making tons of money in advertisement. He's a global icon. Not saying Juan Soto's not popular, but I feel like baseball does a much better job at marketing and promoting Shohei Ohtani, where he's bringing in money hand over fist with advertisements, and he was able to do that deferred contract. But I don't even think the Royals will entertain bringing in Juan Soto, because the contract he's going to get is just nowhere in the stratosphere of where the Royals would be looking to offer a guy like him. I'm not sure the Royals could give somebody a deal that's 10, 11, 12 million, 10 to 11, 12 years for what? 400, 500, 600 million dollars, it feels like, with some of these deals. And they just gave a massive deal to Bobby Witt Jr. So no, I don't see him doing that type of deal, period. I don't see him doing the deferred money thing, mainly because he's not bringing in those advertisement dollars that Shohei Ohtani was able to do. So no matter where he signs, I don't see him doing deferred money. I think he'll be making a lot of money every single year of that deal. Next one comes from Tom. Any non-tender candidates from other organizations you could see the Royals taking a chance on as a bounce back? If I'm not mistaken, Randall Grichuk he was a non-tender candidate for Arizona. I believe I saw that, or he had declined an option. He's somebody that I think, in the smaller sample size that he gave this year, it was under 100 games, but he really popped in the Baseball Savant database. A lot of red on that page. He's always been somebody that hits the ball incredibly hard. Some of his numbers for a handful of years in Colorado were inflated a little bit, but I thought it was very impressive what he was able to do in this past year with Arizona in a limited sample size. But it was him declining the mutual option, so not really a non-tender candidate. I would love to see the Royals bring him in as a platoon option, to be honest with you. I'd have to do a little bit more of a deeper dive into the non-tender candidates. I mean, if I'm pulling them up on the fly here, I would imagine there's a couple of bullpen guys that I would like. One team that the Royals did kind of capitalize on cleaning house a little bit last year was Atlanta. I saw some tweet out there yesterday about Griffin Canning, getting non-tendered right after they acquired him for Jorge Soler. That would be something I would look into going after. I would love to see the Royals go after a project in the pitching department, because I have faith in this Royals pitching development system now to turn somebody into a above average reliever, or maybe a good starter for this team. So I would wait and see in the next couple of weeks who's non-tendered as a failed starter, and maybe the Royals take a chance on it. So that'll more so happen throughout the next couple of weeks leading into the next month or so. Next one comes from Jonathan. Who is the player in free agency that you think the Royals must go after? I will not accept Michael Wacha as an answer. I think right now, a bat that I would really like them to go after, really two guys here. Number one, I think Christian Walker would be such a great addition to the middle of that order. He has been such a above average and consistent bat now for the past 2 to 3 years. You know what you're going to get with him. And he gives you 25 to 30 home run potential. He is elite defensively over at first base. It allows you to DH Vinny Pasquantino a handful of times, play him at first base. And for a guy that's been battling injuries, I think that would make a lot of sense. And I think he'd be affordable, being somebody that's, 34 years old, but still has elite offensive numbers. And there's no, I guess, deception there with his stuff. I mean, offensively, whether it be the eye test, advanced data, he passes all those with flying colors. So to me, he's somebody I would really like to see. I'm bringing up a lot of former Arizona Diamondbacks. Another one would be Jock Peterson. I thought Jock Peterson was phenomenal for Arizona. A lot of pop in that bat. Although the problem is he's predominantly a DH now. He doesn't really play the field that much anymore. So I would love to see maybe a move like that happening. And then if you did want somebody who could play the field and be in left field, I would say Jurickson Profar would be somebody you could try to make a play for. I know in the past the Royals really liked Profar, so we would have to wait and see on that. But those three guys for the lineup, getting one of them, I think would be an absolute home run for Kansas City in free agency. Last one we'll do here in the first segment. This one comes from Prepsily. I think we go after someone in the bullpen. I don't trust Harvey to be consistent. Do you think it's reasonable / possible to go after someone like Carlos Estevez, or I'm assuming Matt Moore here, or Paul Sewald, or Clay Holmes, or Jeff Hoffman? Well, in that Bleacher Report article I brought up with Dan O'Dowd, I think it was Dan O'Dowd. No, it was Jim Bowden. Sorry, Jim Bowden did an article for The Athletic about fits for all these free agents, and Clay Holmes and Jeff Hoffman were fits for the Royals. I just think that with the bullpen, you don't need to overspend for guys like that. The Royals bullpen is, I think, right now built with a lot of guys who can take a big step forward next year. I believe Hunter Harvey's going to bounce back. I thought he was overused. He battled that back injury. I think when healthy, you have a guy that can run it up to the upper 90s with a wipeout splitter. I think he'll be much more improved than what we saw in his short time with Kansas City. If I was to go after one of those arms you just brought up, I love the idea of Paul Sewald kind of having a bounce back deal with Kansas City, to replace somebody like let's say a Will Smith or a Chris Stratton, see if Paul Sewald can recapture that 2023 version of himself. Again, another Arizona Diamondback. I should have just called this a Mailbag Friday featuring the Arizona Diamondbacks because I keep bringing up all these guys who I really liked, but there's a lot of good options coming from those teams. Either they were on one-year deals or they declined player options. I think Paul Sewald with his kind of funky arm angle would fit really well in the bullpen. I also liked Matt Moore a lot last year in free agency. Just another lefty that you could toy with a little bit. So those would be my options rather than overspending for guys like Clay Holmes and Jeff Hoffman. All right, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, still a lot of questions to get to next on this edition of a Mailbag Friday. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our title sponsor today in FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. And never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And you want to sprinkle a little bit of money down here in Kansas City, I expect Travis Kelce to score on Monday night against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Let's jump back into X and see what next round of questions we have. This one comes from Tom. Rays, Marlins, Tigers all have no players entering free agency per the MLBPA release. Do those teams have 40-man roster crunches, and do you see a lead on a trade piece there for KC? If they were to make a trade, it wouldn't shock me if they go after somebody in Miami or they go after somebody in Tampa Bay. I highly doubt the Royals could get a deal done with anybody in Detroit because Detroit, I believe, is still going to be making a lot of roster cuts because I think they're going to be aggressive in free agency. I think they're going to be some guys that they just have to get rid of on their 40-man roster. Those could be 4A guys that are hanging on by a thread. So I'm not really too high on the idea of just plucking, 40-man roster casualties from those three teams. But I do think that Detroit's going to be a team that's adding. So you could look for them to drop off a few players, guys that are DFA'd, guys that are traded before they go out there and make a big free agent signing. But with the Rays and Miami, the Rays are a scary one to trade with because they almost always capitalize on a trade they make. When you give them a player that seems like they're a failed player, they always seem to turn that guy around, and they usually give you somebody that doesn't turn into much. They are great with their scouting department, their player development system. So the Rays, I'd almost stay away from. Miami is intriguing because I think the Royals were interested in Jesus Luzardo last year. I remember there was a deal maybe in place for Vinny Pasquantino, Jesus Luzardo for Vinny Pasquantino. That fell through. I don't think the Royals really even entertained it that much. But you could try to go get some of their pitching, or if you're in the hunt next year, try to go back to Miami because there are a lot of great pitchers there that the Marlins aren't going to be very good. They'll have a new manager at the helm. It'll be a rebuild year for them, and they'll probably still be trying to reload their farm system. So that's a team I would definitely keep an eye on, maybe even as early as this offseason. If they know they're going to be sellers, there's no harm going after some of their talent right now. I mean, there are a lot of different pieces, a lot of young, controllable pieces there. It would just be a matter of, what is Miami searching for, and are the Royals willing to part ways with some minor league guys in their system? But of those three teams, I'd be most willing to go after the Marlins and try to make a trade. Charles asks, is the Bobby Witt Jr. that we saw in 2024 the one we can expect for years to come, or do you think he still has room for improvement? I would say that this is what you can expect from Bobby every single season. If I was to say, can he improve? I mean, absolutely. I think he can improve to win an MVP, if not multiple MVPs. I thought where he struggled toward the end was maybe the approach. I think that approach is really going to get ironed out the more seasoned he gets. I mean, we forget that was only his third professional year at the big league level. And the fact that he was so good all year long is a testament to his ability to adjust, right? They didn't throw him the same pitches over and over and over again. He would adjust time and time again, which made it so hard for pitchers to get him out. I mean, he led the league in average, or led the American League in average. And he is somebody that I believe can win multiple MVPs. I think he can be the best player in baseball. And Aaron Judge having a Barry Bonds-like season offensively, that put him in second place. But that's still a tremendous year. I mean, a near 10 WAR season, that's unheard of. So will that happen every single year? Likely not, because it's really hard to get 10 WAR seasons or close to it. But I still believe that year in, year out, you're going to be looking at a guy that kind of did what Mike Trout did, just 7 WAR season, 8 WAR season, 9 WAR season, over, and having the power, having the speed. Where he can improve, base stealing. Being a better base runner, I think, is where he really could improve, because just stealing that extra base, getting on as much as he does, that can be a game changer for a team that's trying to advance in the postseason. So what we saw, yeah, I'd expect a lot of that next year, but I also think the ceiling has not been reached yet. I think he could be by far and away the best player in baseball, assuming somebody like Aaron Judge doesn't have a Barry Bonds type season next year. Next one comes from Esky8515. What do you think a Brady Singer extension would look like the year and cost-wise if the Royals want to keep him? Also, do you think that this offseason we extend Reagan's or Vinny? And if so, how long and for how much? A Brady Singer extension to me, if the Royals decided to keep him, would probably be, I would say, 3 years. I think this is his last year of arbitration, so they could buy out that last year of arbitration, give him an extra a year there. I think he's set to make the most of any players that are, pre-arbitration right now. So I would say they could get something done of, 11 to 12 million, maybe anywhere from 10 to 15 kind of, and a 1 year extension, a 2 year extension. I could see something like that if the Royals decided to give him that deal. And then as for the other question there on Vinny or Reagan's, I had asked this week, and I believe it would be Reagan's. A couple of people pushed back and said, I wouldn't want to give him that extension because of the injury history. So what's the alternative? You let him walk? I mean, there are so many pitchers in baseball that deal with injuries, right? A lot of guys have had Tommy John, and Cole Reagan's had it technically twice, although it was really once and then it didn't properly heal, and he had to go back and get surgery again. But it's now been a little bit of time since that. And he pitched an entire season. And this was 1 year where I looked at it and I said, this would be where he succumbs to injury, being stretched out for this long for the first time in his career. I believe Cole Reagan's is the ace you build around, and that would get a deal done with him. Vinny, I still think deserves an extension too, but he's somebody that has been, bitten by the injury bug in all 3 years of his big league career. Some of them have been freak injuries. This year was a freak injury, but still, the Royals may want to wait for one full healthy season before they would fork over some money to Vinny. So in my opinion, if they could get an extension done, I'd rather it be with Cole Reagan's, because pitching is going to be expensive. And if he hits the open market and he's pitching like he is right now, that would be something where, you might not be able to afford him at that point. But I also wouldn't, hate it if the Royals have him do this for another year and then you give him that contract extension. But remember, Bobby Witt Jr. was coming off a great year, and everybody said last year, you got to get this deal done because in 2024, he's going to be so good where you might not be able to afford that type of deal. And the Royals got it done before an MVP type season. So if Cole Reagan's even better next year and then you try to get an extension done, he might be too expensive at that point. All right, we're going to take our final break of the show. When we come back, we'll wrap it up with all of our questions next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our final sponsor in Gametime. The baseball season is officially over, but that doesn't mean there's not tons of events out there that you can still buy tickets at. And if you're thinking about it, buy tickets over at Gametime. The Chiefs have a big Monday night game coming up at Arrowhead Stadium. Look over at Gametime and see what deals they have going for you. The cheapest deals, the most expensive deals. Turn the notifications on so you can see when those tickets are really running low and the demand for tickets is high. You can have all those things set up on your notifications page. If you're thinking about going to a concert, again, go over to Gametime. It's where I go to buy all my tickets, as I've told you time and time again. So here's what you need to do. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off on your first purchase. Those terms apply. So again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Our last round of questions begins here with Jacob, I believe it was. Any thoughts on bringing in Trey Mancini on a one-year minor league deal, or maybe even Kevin Biggio? Both guys are looking for a new start and may help this lineup, and both can play the outfield. I wouldn't hate the idea because I feel like I have expressed this before on the podcast. There's nothing wrong with a minor league deal. Absolutely nothing wrong. League minimum. You bring him to spring training. You let him compete. If anything, they can light a fire under some of the players to, get things going. So even if it's a guy that doesn't have good numbers, you're not really doing anything to cripple you financially. It's a minor league deal. They come to spring training, they play well, you have a decision to make, or they have a decision to make if they decline a minor league option. But if they don't play well, you cut them. There's no love lost there. That happens in big league ball. So for Trey Mancini and Kevin Biggio, I would say Biggio would be more intriguing to me just because of his flexibility defensively. I know Trey Mancini can play the outfield as well, but I don't think very well. I mean, Trey Mancini a few years ago was somebody that I would have loved to have in Kansas City. Such a cool story to beat cancer and everything like that. But going back to what he did in 2023 with the Cubs, I mean, nothing really stood out to me. It's been now almost 2 years since his last really productive year offensively. So I don't know if I'd be too high on a guy like Trey Mancini. And then as for Kevin Biggio, looking at his numbers, I know that the Dodgers had picked him up after the Blue Jays let him go, and Atlanta also gave him a chance too. And he just never really caught on. So to me, I wouldn't hate the idea. I don't think it'd be a bad idea just because it's a minor league deal, but I'm not sure any of those guys really have enough left in the tank. But don't hate the question at all. No Name asked, how much do you think the Royals will be willing to spend this offseason? Also, does their biggest addition come through trade or free agency? For question number one, I would expect something similar to last year. I don't see them going under that, really, unless the right guy didn't really fall to them and they decided to trade a little bit more. But to me, I just feel like, this is a team that is honoring the commitment of trying to build a winner here. John Sherman is not going to be cheap. He's not going to, handcuff J.J. Picollo and not give him much to work with. If J.J. Picollo likes a handful of guys, I believe John Sherman's going to give him the money to work with it. So to me, I would imagine it's going to be around the same of what last year was. And then the second part of the question, with the biggest acquisition be free agency or trade, I would probably say free agency, and hopefully free agency, because I don't know if the Royals have enough to trade that would get them a huge addition. You're hoping for little pieces here and there that can help you long term, but I think they're still trying to build up their farm system. They're starting to add some top 100 talent in there, and to deplete that already, it doesn't feel like a good thing to do with where the Royals are, coming off a playoff appearance. So I'd imagine their biggest acquisition will probably be through free agency. Future Dude asks thoughts on Renfroe and Stratton returning through their opt-in, as well as Frazier being gone. Also thoughts on how Jack Caglione has been doing in the fall league. We all saw his hits yesterday. For the first one there, I knew Hunter Renfroe was going to be back. Same with Chris Stratton. There was really no need for them to decline that and go and test free agency. I would imagine that Hunter Renfroe is going to have another opportunity to get the starting job in right field. And when he was healthy this past year, I liked what I saw. Once he really started to catch fire in May, that was something that really bolstered the lineup. But if you can't stay healthy, they need to have somebody that can, provide consistent at bats, a lot of production from a corner outfield spot. And that would probably mean bringing in somebody who could platoon with Hunter Renfroe. So just because he opted back in, it doesn't mean the Royals are just fine with what he did in right field. I still think they'll have some depth there, but I expected him to opt back in. Chris Stratton, there was no need for him to decline that option. He didn't have a good enough year, but I also don't think the Royals are going to keep him at the big league level. I wouldn't be shocked whatsoever if he's a DFA candidate and they move on from him in the offseason at some point. I just think that he decided to take that because nobody else was really going to give him a deal of what he would be making in Kansas City with that opt-in. And as for Jack Caglione, I mean, that's the type of talent that the Royals envision. That's the type of power potential. Going yard twice. I mean, a ball hit 430 feet to right field. I know it's Arizona. The ball flies there, but his exit velocity on one of his singles was 117. He puts it all together. I mean, that approach comes around. He cuts down in the swing and miss. That could be one of the more powerful bats in all of Major League Baseball once he fully develops. And so I don't want to read in too much to what he did, but if I see a prospect do that, there's something there. Like if Jack Caglione was hitting 400 with a bunch of singles in the fall league, I don't think I'd be as excited. He's not hitting super well in the fall league and didn't hit super well in Quad Cities, but he's scalding the ball. And that's what I'll take from a guy that's still trying to find his footing and probably feels a little bit fatigued now going from college ball to, high A and then extending that to the fall league. Those are all things that are, really, really tough to do for an entire season. So I expect him to really come out running, to begin 2025. RB Carr asked, does Evan Sisk's 40-man roster ad make one of the other lefty relievers possible trade chip? I would say maybe. I still think it's an uphill battle for Evan Sisk to make the team out of camp. He's really got to tighten up the command. And if he's able to do that, it certainly gives the Royals an option, but somebody has to be the odd man out. That would be, a Sam Long, a Daniel Lynch, a Chris Bubich. And right now, or Angel Serpa, I'm not really willing to give up any of those guys to make room for Evan Sisk. I think he's going to have a good chance to get a lot of opportunities in spring training to showcase his skills a little bit. But to me, I don't know if any of those guys would be a valuable trade chip right now, or the Royals would be willing to move on to one of those guys. Maybe they look as Evan Sisk as a trade chip for a team that's trying to fill up a bullpen spot, and the Royals could get maybe a bench bat that could help them out a little bit with their depth. RB Carr also asked, most important players needed to be added to 40-man to protect from Rule 5. I think you would be looking at somebody like, I would probably say Noah Cameron's number one there. I think Eric Sarantola would be another one that could go in the Rule 5 because of his strikeout stuff as well. Javier Vaz might be somebody that needs to be added to the 40-man roster. I'd probably need to double check on that one. But there's a couple other pitchers that I do think would be in danger of being picked up in the Rule 5 draft. Luinder Avila is another guy that I do think is in danger of being taken in the Rule 5 draft. The Royals really like him, so he makes a lot of sense. And then I'd probably say Tyson Guerrero, another left-handed arm that the Royals really, really like. So to me, those would probably be some of the names that I believe the Royals need to protect on the 40-man roster. JHB asked timeline for Cags to be in KC and who else could be up and play a role in the 20s and 25 that hasn't been up yet. I would say for Caglione, you're looking late 2025 or early 2026. And as for a guy to make an impact, I'd say Noah Cameron could be making a couple starts for this team next season. Jeff's question that'll round us out is, if you were dressed as a Royals player for Halloween, who would it be, or any MLB player? I don't have any hard-hitting question. I would say I would dress as, someone that would be funny. I'll go as George Brett with the pine tar on the jersey and everything. I think that'd be a good look and maybe grow out the hair a little bit. So maybe that would be my pick next year for Halloween if I was to go as a baseball player. All right, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB as baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the offseason. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. We'll be off this weekend, but back on Monday talking more off-season stuff for the Royals. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.